Welcome to JobTread 203. We're going to cover all of your Takeoff tools. The first question I have for you, though, is what is Takeoff? It's important that we understand that Takeoff is not just the plans portion of JobTread. It's actually used so that we can make sure that we grab all of the list of quantities for a job through the use of our plans, our measurements, our budgets, our parameters, our formulas. All of those all together are used for the Takeoff process. And typically we're doing this right before the estimating process of a job. So what I like to do is start with the goal in mind. So we need to identify what measurements do we need in order to do your estimate. So often we get excited and we think, hey, let's just dive into the plans tab, let's upload our plans and just start measuring. Well, if you don't know what you're measuring for, then that's actually going to be a big waste of time. So it's important that we actually start in the budget of your job and identify what we're looking for before we actually start measuring. So then we can write our story. So once we decide, okay, yep, this cost item, we need a measurement for this in order to inform the quantity, then you're going to write the story for that. What additional information do you need for that quantity to be true? So for example, yes, we do need the linear feet for all of our baseboards, but we also need to add in some wastage onto that. So writing that story and then knowing exactly what you're getting at, but how you want to get there is going to be also extremely important when thinking about using the Takeoff tools. So then I really want to introduce you to the concept of parameters. Some of you have been using parameters for your formulas, but for some of you, this might be a new concept. Parameters are essentially used to store your job-related information. So you can have as many parameters as you need to for your job, and then you can store data in them. So the cool part about parameters is that they are also going to be used to store your measurements. So you can have one or multiple measurements rolled up into a single parameter that then you can reference within your budget. So you're going to see it real time as we walk through it today. But when we first rolled out parameters a while back, we had 3 parameter types. So you can have a pick list parameter, you could have a number parameter, and you could have a formula parameter. Those were the 3 types that were available to you, and all of those require manual entry. However, now with the new plans tab and the new Takeoff tools, we have added a ton more parameter types to allow you to measure with those parameters. So we'll be introducing those today. But parameters are essentially places to store information, and then you can reference that information throughout your budget. So let's pop into JobTread and dig into this together live. So I'm going to go into my JobTread job here. So I have a basic job. We are going to play around with plans for this farmhouse today. And where we want to start, though, remember, is in your budget. So let's head to that budget tab. Now in our budget tab, you'll see that you have your basic estimating section. So if you're going to be using your plans and doing Takeoff in JobTread, I recommend turning on a couple additional columns in your budget. The first column I'd like to turn on is this quantity formula column. That is going to allow us to reference any of our measurements that we have, and also we can build formulas around those to add wastage, to round up, things like that. And then I also recommend maybe turning on a column for like internal notes or formula notes or quantity notes, something like that. You can create a cost item custom field, and then you can turn that on here. I like having that column on because that's where I can tell the story of how I want to arrive at the quantity. So for example, for Windows, all I need is a count. It's going to be a quick standard count. So I just wrote count in here so I know that when I'm wanting to measure for that, I'm just going to do a count. But then for hardwood flooring, for example, I want to gather the area of that hardwood flooring. I want to add 10% wastage, and I want to round up on that. So putting all those notes in like an internal notes field really helps you to know exactly how you arrived at the number that you're looking for, but also it's going to guide you when building formulas. So we're going to take advantage of those here soon. So if you'd like to turn on these columns, all you need to do is click that gear icon above your budget, and then you'll see your budget view settings. And you can turn on or off different columns in your budget. I turned on my internal notes one. If you don't see that one, it just means you need to create a cost item custom field in your JobTread settings in order to see that on here. Additionally, we have the quantity formula added here. In some of your cases, they'll be at the very, very end of your list. That's totally fine. Go ahead and turn them on and drag them up to where you want them to be presented in your budget. Then, of course, you can hit save to save those changes to your main view, or you can click save as, and you can save a new budget view for yourself. Maybe you call that one your takeoff view. All right. Awesome. So now that we know what we're looking for example, here in vinyl siding, we need the area without the windows and the doors. For roofing material, we need the area with pitch. For concrete slab, we need the area volume. These are all the goals that we're looking for. So when we're doing our measurements, then those are the measurements that we need. So let's go ahead and we're going to pop into our plans tab now that we know our goals. So go to plans. Here in your plans tab, you'll see it's a pretty blank slate. This is where we can now add our plans for the job. So I can either upload them from my device or copy them from my files tab here in JobTread. And in this case, I'm just going to click and drag, drop those files in here. Now notice this is one PDF file, and this one PDF file has several pages within it. So yes, I can add tags to this like all my normal files, and this single PDF file will be saved in my Files tab on my job. But when I add it to my Plans section, it will also separate into the 25 different plan sheets from that PDF, because it's a lot easier to open a single sheet at a time and measure than to keep scrolling on a PDF to do your measurements. So in this case, each individual sheet is now a plan. Okay. Now you can always rename these plans if you click into them. You can rearrange them if you need to by the naming convention. But what we're going to do next is we need to make sure that we scale these plans. As I'm sure some of you who have used Takeoff tools before, scaling, you understand that scaling is extremely important. So I'm going to go ahead and scale maybe a couple pages here. Now you have the option. You can scale each page manually to start with, or you can scale them as you go, but you only need to scale a page once. And you do have to scale each page because each of your pages could have a different scale on it. And we don't want you to miss that because that can mess up all your numbers. So we're going to go ahead and scale this sheet just by clicking on that plan sheet. This is our first floor, and I'm going to click Scale Plan on the bottom right. Now notice you have two options for scaling. You can set a preset scale, and these are just standard scales that we already have here in the system, or you can do a manual scale. So let's go ahead and choose the preset scale because this plan says it's 1/4 to 1, and so I'm going to select that. Here it is. Perfect. Now it's scaled and everything's good to go. Now, if you wanted to do a manual scale, you also could click on this and then you can select some scale points. So if I click the manual scale option, now I can choose the points on my plan that I'd like to set as my scale. Basically, you just need to know the distance of that. And we always recommend use one of the longer distances on your plan. So I know that between these markers, it's going to be 16 feet. So let's go ahead and set the scale with those. So I'm going to click on here and then I can always snap to, so I can hold down Shift to make it a straight line. And then I can choose exactly where I'm headed. All right, so now I know that 16 feet, so I can enter in here 16 feet, 0 inches, great, and then update that. Okay, now if we look at our scale down on the bottom right, you'll notice that it says approximately 1/4 to 1, which originally that's what the plan set said. But whenever you do a manual scale, it does have a little approximation symbol because there could be slight variances. We're not all perfect with our cursors. So if you ever wanted to verify your scale, you also have the option to use the ruler. The ruler is just a quick tool that allows you to measure 2 points, and it's not going to save that measurement anywhere. It just simply gives you a reference. So here I can verify my scale by maybe clicking up here and making sure that this is indeed 32 feet. And it looks pretty darn good. 32.14 feet. Okay, so that's pretty close. Of course, the preset scales are always going to be the most accurate, but this just allows me to double check. So I can stop that ruler, and in fact, I can remove it from my screen there. Let's go ahead and use that preset scale for this one though, just to make sure that we are perfect in our measurements. Awesome. Like I mentioned, you only have to scale a page once, so we can go back to our plans and we can go ahead and scale the next page, which is the second floor. And again, this one does say 1/4 to 1, so that looks good to me. Thank you, architect. We already have our scale, and so we are good to go. All right, so that is the first step that we're going to take whenever we're doing our plans. Now, the next step is to start measuring. So let's head back to our plans and we can choose the measurement that we want to use. So the first measurement I'm going to use is count. I'm going to count the windows that are on my plans. So I'll go to the first plan set here, and here you'll see I have my first floor. And whenever you're ready to add a new measurement, you're going to actually create a parameter to save those measurements. Imagine parameters as almost folders, and then each of your measurements can go within that one folder and even roll up to the total amount. So we'll go ahead and choose a parameter. Remember, the top 3 parameters on this list are manual entry, but then everything underneath those will be using measurements to inform them. So we're going to choose count. We'll start really simple today. And I'm going to name this windows. Great. Now I hit enter, or I can click plus measurement, and now I can put a measurement within the windows parameter. So let's go ahead. We are already measuring. You can see it here. And all I need to do is just click and do my count directly on this plan. There we go. So we have 5 windows on this floor, it looks like. Okay, and then I can stop my measuring. And now I'm going to maybe label that first floor. Great. And now maybe I also want to add windows for the second floor. So let's go ahead and go back to our plans, and I'll choose that second floor here. There it is. And I want to add an additional measurement within the general windows parameter. So let's click plus measurement. And now I can label that second floor, and I can just start adding my counts. All right, so we have 7 windows on the second floor. Great, I can stop that. And now you'll see that we also aggregate a total for the parameter of 12 windows, but then we can also reference the first floor separate from the second floor when we were looking at our budget. And we'll do that in just a little bit. All right, so that is the basic count tool. Very simple. You just click on your plans and that's all there is to it. Okay, awesome. Let's move on to another parameter type. So we're going to add a parameter for our flooring. Okay, so let's go actually to the first floor, start there. There it is. And we want to measure our hardwood flooring for the house. So I'm going to click plus parameter, and I will choose my area parameter. And this will just be hardwood flooring. Perfect. And then I hit enter, and now I can start measuring for the hardwood. So right now, by default, we're going to be using a polyline for that measurement. So as you can see, it says hardwood floor. So I'm just going to click and drag. And again, you can hold down that shift key to snap in a vertical line there. Actually, let's head all the way down here. Perfect. All right, this looks good. I could either complete my shape, or I could just hit enter and it will complete the shape for me. So here's my one hardwood floor section, and let's go ahead and add another one. Now I can add multiple shapes to this one measurement as well, so I can just keep on measuring. So an easier way to do this, rather than using my little polyline, is I can go up to the top and choose rectangle. Now I can go ahead and just draw a little rectangle for ease of use. There we go, that looks good to me. And now I can stop that measurement. And we're good to go on the floor 1. Actually, I should stay consistent with your naming conventions. First floor, there we go. All right, and then maybe I want to add some hardwood flooring on the second floor. So I can actually go up to my recent plans and I can pop to that second floor nice and easily because I was there recently. All right, let's add a measurement here, and we are going to do second floor. Awesome. And just start measuring. So again, I'm just gonna, for the sake of the quick training. I'm just going to draw some rectangles on here for us, and we'll go ahead and get those added. Oh, almost. Now you also have a select tool. So if I click select, now I can adjust these too. So I can double click and drag the points if I needed to make some adjustments. Okay, that looks good to me. Now notice that it did populate your overall parameter with all of your hardwood flooring throughout. Now, if I ever wanted to jump back to the first floor and be like, wait, where was that hardwood flooring? I can click my little jump button arrow here and it will pop me back to that original measurement. Let's move on and do a little bit of carpet here. So I'm going to add another parameter, and this one will be area as well. And we're just going to do this one quickly. So here's my carpet. So now I'll do first floor as well. And I'll head into my recent plan for that. Okay, we'll click on this little measurement tool here. And I'm just going to go ahead and again, make this easy on us real quick, get some measurements in here. Hit enter, and that will complete that box. And then let's add one for the second floor. Okay, and again, go to my other recent plan and I can just measure away. Okay. Of course, you all will be much more precise in your measurements, hopefully, but when I'm training, I gotta kind of move quick. All right, so now we have carpet for both floors and we're good to go for our flooring. Let's go ahead and move on to another example of using area, and that's maybe for like the siding on the outside of the house. So I'm going to add a new parameter, and this one will also be for area, but I'm going to call this vinyl siding. All right. Now, before I click into plus measurement, I want to go to a different plan of mine, and this one will be right here. So let's select this. And remember, we don't have a scale set for this plan sheet quite yet, so I can do them as I go. And here we go. I'm just going to give it that 1/4 to 1 here as well. Perfect. All right, so we have to measure the space for the vinyl siding. So of course, we're going to hit plus measurement. And I'm going to use that little rectangle tool to make this nice and easy on myself. Click and drag. Awesome. Now, some of you might be thinking, that's not correct. This total number, 595.8 square feet, is not necessarily accurate because we've got some windows and doors. So there is an option to do a negative measurement up top. So while you're in measurement mode, you can click the negative measurement, and now you can trace these windows and it will remove those windows from your overall measurement. So you see that it makes it white. Now, another really cool tool is I can go into select here, and now I see that that is a selected section. So I can actually copy that, Control C, Control V, and now I can just pop it in for all the windows. A lot easier than trying to get super precise on every single one, right? Do it well once, and why not? Or why reinvent the wheel? Okay, I can also add an additional negative measurement by going back into that measurement or that measuring status and then clicking negative measurement. Let's do a rectangle and let's get around this door. Now this is going to be very rudimentary, but let's just do it nice and easy here. Perfect. And then we'll hit stop. So what I just did is I actually subtracted the windows and the doors from my overall area measurement on the siding of that house. Okay, awesome. So now we have the siding, and this is on the north side. So I'm just going to say north exterior. Great. And I could always add additional sidings or siding for the other sides of the house whenever I'd like. But we're going to stick with that for now. Okay, perfect. Let's talk a little bit about area pitch. So factoring in that slope. So if we would like to measure the roof of this house, let's go ahead and add a new parameter, and this one will be the area pitch one. And I'm going to call this the roof materials or just roof, either way, it's fine. And then let's add a new measurement. And again, this will be the north side. Great. And now I can click measure. So just like the area, there we are. Yep. Just like the area, we can definitely just use a rectangle there. I'm going to do a polyline because this roof is a little bit slanted. So let's work around this. We'll pop down here. Awesome. And then hit enter. Okay. So if I just kept standard area there, that's actually not going to be accurate because there is a slope to this roof. So therefore, we need to factor in additional materials for that. So I can use the pitch option here to then add in what that slope is. On my plans, it's saying 12 of 12. So I'm going to go ahead and add the pitch 12 here. And now you'll see that my square feet has adjusted to take into account that pitch or that slope. So there are some, anytime that there's like 3 dimensions or more than 2 dimensions, there could be additional details that your measurement needs in order to be accurate. So keep your eye on that whenever you're making a measurement. Another example of that would be like area volume. So let's go ahead and measure the concrete for this house. So I'm going to go back to my plans and let's just go into this one here, scale that plan. There we are. Perfect. And then I'm going to add a new parameter and we are going to do area volume. This will bring us into that 3rd dimension, not just the length times width, but we also have to add some depth to it. So I'll call this concrete and then hit plus measurement. And now I can label this the slab. Great. Okay. Let's go ahead and measure the size of our concrete slab here. So I'm just going to pop a rectangle in. Here we go. Okay, now I'll stop measuring. And now you can see that I can also indicate depth. So it's initially set as at 36 inches. Let's say we want this one to be a bit thicker at 48 inches. And then you'll see that your cubic yards increases when you do increase the depth. So area volume is very similar to the others. It just has that other 3rd factor. You could also add another measurement for footings, and maybe you want to measure each footing and also include even more depth to those. So this would then all roll up to the amount of concrete that you need. All right, and then the last example I want to show you here today is your linear measurements. So let's think about baseboards with this. So I'm going to pop back into one of my plans here that I already have, and I want to add a new parameter for linear measurements, and we'll do baseboards. Great, plus measurement and floor. Oh yeah, first floor. First floor. Okay. All right, so I can go ahead and draw those out, but as you can see on this sheet, it's a little overwhelming right now. I already have my areas measured for flooring. I have my counts on here. It's quite a bit to look at. So we do have the ability to show or hide different measurements. So on this left column here, you'll see this little eyeball icon. You can choose to hide different measurements. And you can always show them again, but this way then we can kind of start from a blank slate. They're all in layers on top of one another. So then let's go ahead and measure out our baseboards. So click the measure tool, and you can do it with a polyline tool here. So measuring linear feet, and we can go around all of these sides if we want to. Sure, we'll just pop it over here. I'm sure there's some variation though, of course, when you're doing stairs, but we're going to keep it simple. And then I also can then break that line and pop into another section as well. Quick note, if you are wanting to measure, let's say, the trim around doors, you could use linear with drop and put the drop of the size, the height of the door on each side. And then you also could then put the door width on there too. So, okay, not being very precise here, but this gives you an idea of how you can start end to end and break those lines to then work around your baseboards, and you'll see them listed here. All right, team, so let's pop into our budget and see how we use these parameters now that we've done some of these measurements that have rolled into those parameters. So when we go back to our budget, I'm going to then reference those parameters here in my budget. I do want to point out the parameters section of your budget. You have this little parameters button right here. It is actually going to show you all of your measurements that you just took and any manual entry parameters that you have. And then you can always expand them to see more information. But this is going to be where you can quickly reference those job parameters without having to go into that plans tab. You can also add additional parameters here too. So let's go ahead and add those parameters here. Anytime you want to reference a parameter in a cost item in your budget, you're going to go to the formula section, and now you can reference the count, for example, for the windows. You can just start typing windows and it will dwindle it down. But notice that I can reference the parameter as a whole, or I can reference single measurements that are housed within that parameter here. So maybe I had two different cost items. One was for windows that were 5x7. Another one was for windows that are 4x6, let's say. And so then I can just reference each individual type. All right, so let's reference the window count all together. Perfect. Once I select that, you'll see that it pops that window count there into my quantity, and I can save that. I already had the cost per window, so it multiplied it and added it in my margin for the price for the customer. Let's go ahead and choose my hardwood flooring. So this, I'm going to take the area of my hardwood flooring, and then I need to add on some additional formula portions to it. So let's pop this in, and I'm going to do hardwood. There's my parameter. I want both the first and second floor, so I'm going to choose the overall parameter here. Perfect. Now that just brought over my raw number. Now what I can do is I can add a 10% waste factor on there by multiplying that times 1.1 times 10%, and now I added on my waste factor. Now I also could choose to round that to the nearest whole number, let's say. So I'm going to add an operator, or some of you call it a function, to the beginning, and I could just do my round one here. And then I can complete it by adding that parentheses at the end. Now notice that it rounded it to the nearest whole number. Now, I would actually discourage using the rounding tool like this because it's going to round it down sometimes if it's the nearest to the lower whole number. So I would recommend using ceiling instead of round. That will always round it up to the whole number that's higher. So we can change that to CEIL, that's ceiling. And now you'll see it rounded it up to 654 square feet. Okay. So that is basically taking my story. I need the area plus a 10% wastage, and then I need to round it. So here I rounded it, I have my area, and I added my wastage. Nice work. Okay, let's go ahead and do it again. So same thing with carpet. We're going to do the ceiling again, CEIL, add that parentheses, and now we can do our carpet. There it is. And then I want to multiply that by 1.1 to add that 10% waste factor, and I can complete the parentheses. And here we are at 246 square feet. If you're overwhelmed by these formulas right now, don't worry. I have a separate training on formulas and parameters, and I encourage you to watch that next because that will dive into all of the basic formulas that you might want to get familiar with. All right, so vinyl siding, the area without the windows and doors. Well, we already removed the windows and doors when we were measuring, so all we need to do is reference the parameter here. Vinyl siding, here it is. And we're done. We're good to go there. Let's do the same with area pitch for the roofing. Awesome. And then same for the concrete slab. Great. All right, we'll save those changes. Now let's take it one step further with our formula here, and let's get the baseboards in here. So we have our linear feet from our measurement. We need to add 5% for cutting and wastage, and I want to round it to the nearest 10 feet because let's say each of my baseboards are 10 feet long when I purchase them. So we want to round up to 10 feet increments. So let's go ahead and get that in here. So I'm going to start by first adding my baseboards parameter. We need to reference that. Now let's multiply that by 1.05. That's going to add the 5% waste factor. Perfect. And I'm going to pop those into parentheses just so that we keep that calculation together. Oop. Now I can go ahead and add my ceiling on there. Great. And that's going to be very similar. Oops. Added two parentheses here. That'll be very similar to what I've done up here But the difference right now is that we need to round up to the nearest 10 feet. So we can do a comma. This tells the system, now make sure that we're rounding to the right increment. And I'm just going to do, if I do, let's say, the number 1 here, it's going to put it to 1 decimal point. If I do the number 2, it'll do it to 2 decimal points. That's not really what I want. But if you go negatives, you could do -1. That's going to round it to the nearest 10 whole numbers, right? And then you could do -2, and that'll round it to the nearest 100. So again, these are little tricks that you can learn in that formulas training, but just know it's possible to get this specific within your formulas. Heck, I've seen formulas that are like paragraphs long. And so if you're a little overwhelmed right now, just start small and kind of grow as you go. But if you're catching on to this, it's really nice to know what's possible. All right, let's keep moving forward, and I'm going to show you some nice tools to know. Now that you understand how the Plans tab interacts with the Budget tab, now I can show you some cool tips and tricks. So the first thing I want to do is go back to our Plans tab. Here in our Plans tab, there are a few more tools that are nice to know. So if I'm, let's say, in this plan here, and I want to add some maybe text for context or arrows and such, you do have your standard markup tools here on the right-hand side. So you can add text to the top of that sheet if you wanted to add some additional context that will always stay with that sheet. Okay. We also did point out that eyeball tool so you can show and hide different parts of your plans. We also have those jump arrows. So if you were looking for, let's say, the roof measurement, I can click on that arrow here and it's going to bring me to that page nice and easily. And then you do have your recent sheets, as we've talked about before. I also want to mention that we have versions in here. So let's say that you measured off this first version of plans and then you were sent an updated version of plans, and really it's just this one sheet that has been updated. Well, you can always click down here and you can change that file version and upload a new version of that page, and then you will have all of your historical versions as well. What that does is that now your measurements will plop on top of that new version, and remember they're layers, so you can flip between the versions and see what has changed. All right. And so we've got that covered. Also, I want to show you some shortcuts. So it could get kind of cumbersome every time that you want to take a measurement to click over here on the left to add a new parameter and all that. Well, you can right-click anywhere on the plans, and this is where you can enter that pan mode. You can add parameters and measurements right there with the click of a button. You also can turn on that ruler tool or show or hide all your measurements nice and quickly. So use that right-click menu anywhere on here, and it's going to be extremely helpful for you. Additionally, we have keyboard shortcuts. So if you're ever wanting to see the keyboard shortcuts on any page in JobTread, you can hold down that Shift key and click the question mark. Make a question mark on your keyboard, and it will bring up the keyboard shortcuts for that portion of JobTread. And here you'll see that we have plenty of keyboard shortcuts for when you're using the Plans tool. But we also have keyboard shortcuts to navigate JobTread in general as well. So hold down that Shift key, click the question mark, and you'll see that keyboard shortcut menu pop up, and you can get very familiar with those shortcuts. All right. Awesome. We also, I do want to point out full screen mode. So if you just needed more screen space while you're doing your measurements, you definitely have that option too. And you can even hide all your parameters to do the measurements and still have access to that right-click menu. All right, now some of you have been wondering, how do you template this? Because it can get a little bit cumbersome recreating these all the time. So let's go ahead and pop into our budget here. Let's say that we really like what we've done here. Maybe you're a deck builder and you use kind of the same formulas for each type of job. Or, maybe not. Maybe you do more custom builds, but there are some that can remain consistent. Well, once you have built out those formulas and you see those parameters in here, you can always export this as a budget template in your catalog. So I'll click export to catalog, and we will name this home build with Takeoff. Sure. All right. And then we'll hit OK. Now it's created in your catalog and all of your formulas are saved as well as those parameters. So let's go ahead and create a new job. Plus job. We're going to choose who that job is for. And I'm just going to skip all that stuff to do it nice and quickly. Okay. Now when I head into my budget, I can add my cost group or budget template that I've saved. And we'll do Takeoff. Here it is, home build with Takeoff. So I can add all these here. You'll see that all the formulas came with them, but also if I go up to parameters, it's giving me a little red dot. That means we have to review and save our parameters. Good, here they all are, and we can hit save. And I highly suggest when you're up here, make sure that the parameter type is correct. So that is one thing that we're working on carrying over as well, but we want to make sure that you have the parameter type accurate. And then that way, all of these will end up popping over to your plans tab. Ooh, save those changes. All right, you can do Control Save or Control S if you need to. And then you can just go ahead and add your measurements. Another option is going into your catalog, and there is a parameters, a catalog parameters list on the top right. If you open that, now you can set up all your standard parameters that you typically use, and you can already choose that parameter type. And then you can even select the parameter colors here, and they will carry over to your job, so you're easily able to add them as well. Okay. All right, so I want to make sure that I go over a couple strategies to keep in mind. The first is start simple and grow as you go. You could get easily overwhelmed by the Takeoff tools that we have here in JobTread. So if you've never done Takeoff on an on-screen platform before, then I highly recommend just starting real small and simply just measure, okay, here's lineal feet for X, or I just need to know the flooring for this room. And then just stick with that and don't add too many formulas to it. And then, of course, you can always add on to that later on, but just start very small. Also, be intentional with how you name your parameters and your measurements, because when you're adding them to the budget, you want to know what you're looking for. So name them consistently and make sure that your team is consistent in how they name those parameters and measurements. Also, use that catalog to save your cost items in groups, and also make sure that you save your parameters in there with their parameter type so that it makes it a lot more easier when you're moving forward. And then lastly, don't force the use of measurements and parameters. If a cost item is there, like let's say the city permit, you don't have to try to get a formula in there. You don't have to try to get a measurement for that. So don't force the use of them. Just, kind of add them as they come up, let the need come to you, and make sure that you clearly define what goal you're looking for with that cost item. And then that essentially is knowing your information before you start measuring. What information are you looking for first, and then get into the measurement tool. And yeah, you probably don't need to use the measurements on every single cost item. So pick the ones that are most important for you. Okay, and then of course, I've mentioned a couple times, we do have the formulas and parameters training in the help desk already. All you need to do is go to that trainings tab on the top and then click recorded, and you'll see my formulas recorded training. And again, I dig really deep into formulas, but formulas are just the added benefit onto your Takeoff tool. Additionally, make sure that you reach out to your success manager if you have specific questions or need training on unique use cases. They are there for you. You can find them in your help desk and schedule a meeting with them, or you can even jump into their daily group office hours to get help. But they are there for you to walk through your specific needs, as this is like a nice baseline overall training. All right, so I'm going to stick around for just a couple more minutes. If you have any additional questions, I'm happy to answer those for you. But if not, thank you so much for attending today, and I hope to see you on future trainings. Happy Takeoff.